Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guest, Dr. Avanti Kumar Singh, who's here to share with us her new book, The Longevity Formula, Ayurvedic Principles to Reduce Inflammation, Increase Cellular Repair, and Live with Vitality. So isn't it time we reframe our approach to aging? Well, today's guest is going to share with us just that. So Dr. Avanti Kumar Singh is an internationally recognized Ayurveda and integrative medicine practitioner, a certified yoga therapist, and a former ER doctor. Her approach brings together Western medicine with ancient wisdom of Ayurveda from her South Asian lineage. So let's welcome to the show, Dr. Avanti Kumar Singh.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. So you have to share with me, what even inspired you to write this?
It's interesting. About 3 years ago, I'm 53 now. I was about to turn 50. And I started thinking about the next era of my life. And, I had just launched my younger child off to college and was really just thinking about, what am I going to be doing for sort of the wisdomhood years, as we call them in Ayurveda? And I started to think about my elders, my parents, my aunts and uncles, my grandparents. I'm South Asian and I'm first generation here in the United States. And I was thinking about all of them and the way that they age. And I was thinking, how did they do this in such a beautiful way where they are in their 70s, 80s, 90s, living with such vitality and optimal health, living independently, doing all the things of daily life for themselves, cognitively, really, really sharp, engaged with their families and their communities. And I was just thinking, that's what I want for myself as I go into this next sort of era, if you will, of my life. And I started to think about, well, what's the secret sauce here? What are they doing that is allowing them to age in this way? And I sort of went down the rabbit hole of doing research and thinking and, sort of making connections. And that's really where the idea for this book came from.
So what were some of the major differences that you discovered?
I think that the first thing that I really discovered was sort of this overall approach to life, but more so this approach to aging or getting older is completely different. What I had grown up seeing in the United States, sort of in the media and sort of outside of my home, is this picture that, we see in Western culture of people needing orthopedic shoes and needing dentures and, having lots of pain and maybe needing to live in a nursing home. Those were sort of the things I was seeing, in the world around me. But what I was seeing at home was very different, right? It was these people aging with all this vitality. And so I think that that's really the difference that I saw is that, first of all, there's a sort of perspective on aging that is very different in the East, in South Asia and India, where my family is from, versus what we see in the West. And it's sort of this embracing of aging in a way that says that, as you get older chronologically, your wisdom, your experience is so valuable. And I think it changes how we perceive aging in South Asian culture versus in the West, right? It's very much about anti-aging, fighting against aging, with the idea that everything starts to break down, your mind, your body, your ability to contribute, right? It's a very different perspective. And so I think that was the biggest thing that I saw, that sort of the light bulbs started to go off for me.
So what are some of the key factors behind us aging and maybe aging poorly?
the idea for the longevity formula really came from this idea of like, well, what's the difference between not only this perspective, but, how are they aging so well in the East versus the West? And I started to, again, sort of dig into the research and dig into the data. Longevity is a really hot topic these days in Western medicine. And I think really thinking about, well, these longevity mechanisms that we talk about, or the mechanisms of aging, which is the flip side of that. How is it that we age? And the formula that I came up with was really sort of looking at it from an Ayurvedic perspective, but then sort of integrating what I was seeing in Western medicine. And what I saw in Ayurvedic medicine is that as we age, if we can nourish the tissues or the tissue layers, there are 7 tissue layers in Ayurveda called the dhatus. And that if we can nourish those tissue layers as we age chronologically, we will physiologically be able to slow down sort of the negative effects of aging, right? And the way I was able to correlate that to Western medicine is through the mechanisms of aging. And what I saw is that the mechanisms of aging that are sort of widely agreed upon, there's 9 mechanisms of aging. In those mechanisms of aging, the real culprit is the accumulation of cellular damage, which causes all kinds of problems, right? And so the longevity formula is really focused on decreasing the accumulation of cellular damage in the tissues. And so, if you can do that, you're nourishing the tissues instead of depleting the tissues, and that leads to longevity. And so, let me back up. So, the 2 pieces of that, like you already mentioned, was you can decrease the accumulation of cellular damage by either increasing cellular repair or decreasing inflammation. So there's sort of the 2 levers that you can push and be able to decrease that accumulation of cellular damage. So those are sort of the 2 parts of the longevity formula.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I was just so fascinated in how you're bringing in these Ayurvedic principles and how we can, in many ways, kind of reset our body and live better.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's really it's so interesting because when you take a step back and start to look at it from this perspective of what can I do on a daily basis to nourish my tissues, right? As I get older, that's sort of the key. And if you can focus on that, you'll find that it's a lot easier to sort of wrap your head around how do I increase and support my longevity, right? Because we can get really into, how am I decreasing inflammation? How do I increase cellular repair? And I go into all of that in the book. But really, when it comes down to it, if you can start to think of it as how can I nourish my tissues? How can I support my tissues so that as I get older, they're functioning well, they're nourished, they're not becoming depleted. The depletion is what causes all of the symptoms that we sort of correlate or associate with aging, right? The pain, the decrease in cognitive function, the difficulty of doing our daily, living activities, right? These are all things that come with the depletion of the tissues. So if we can instead just focus in on how can I nourish all of the 7 tissues of the body every day, it becomes a lot easier to sort of think about this.
Can you explain how this the practice of Ayurveda works alongside modern medicine to promote longevity?
Hmm. Yeah, what's really interesting is that so many of the things that we've been doing in Ayurveda for 5,000 years, we now have all of the data, all of the studies that show that what we've been doing for 5,000 years is scientifically sound. The Vedyas and the ancients didn't know the actual science behind what they were suggesting and what they had written down in these Vedic texts. But it turns out that everything is scientifically proven to work, right? And so that's how you can sort of bring them together. So, for example, let's think about one practice that I talk about in the book, which is to get outside every morning before 10 a.m. or 10 to 20 minutes, whatever you can, add to your routine, where you get natural sunlight into your retina, into your eyes, right? The whole idea there is that from an Ayurvedic perspective, you're living in harmony with nature. And when you live in harmony with nature, you will have optimal health. That is sort of the basic essence of Ayurveda. Now, from a Western standpoint, what you're doing by getting outside and getting that sunlight into your retina is you are sending a powerful message to your brain, to your body that, oh, it's daytime. Let's reset your circadian rhythm again every single morning. And that's important because we know from circadian medicine that if we can keep our circadian clock in sync with the path of the sun, with daylight and nighttime throughout a 24-hour cycle, we actually keep everything functioning in our bodies really, really well. Everything is humming along the way that it should, right? Because basically cortisol and melatonin, which are controlled by light, right? The cycles of light over a 24-hour period, those are controlled by light. And those have a downstream cascade effect on every other hormone, system, cell, organ of the body. And so, again, what we knew in Ayurveda 5,000 years ago, which is to live in harmony with nature on that daily 24-hour cycle, and that it's so important for health to keep us well. We now know physiologically and scientifically that, oh, that's because what we're doing is we're resetting circadian rhythm every single day, which keeps things functioning correctly.
I have some neighbors that bring their newborn out every morning so that the baby
Mm-hmm.
can get sunlight on its face, and now I know why.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And they're doing it for themselves too. They're resetting their circadian rhythm every single morning, which is very, very important for health. And what's so interesting is that, it seems so simple. And many people will say to me when they come to my lectures or if I'm working with them one-on-one, they'll be like, is it really that simple? And I say, yes, it actually is. It's really that simple.
It's probably very encouraging for so many people. Yeah, and it has me kind of thinking. I know you talk about health span versus lifespan. I'd love for you to
Mhm.
share the difference with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. Health span versus lifespan. All of us know what lifespan is, right? Lifespan is how many years you are alive on this earth, right? It's our chronological age. And Western medicine is really, really good at extending our lifespan, right? We can keep living and we can extend life with all of the amazing technology that we have and the science and the medications and the surgeries and procedures. We can extend life for many, many years past where most people would be able to live if they didn't have those interventions, right? That's lifespan. Health span is more of this longevity piece. The idea of a health span is how many of those years that you are alive on earth are you living with vitality, with optimal health, where you can do everything that you want to do, where you can have a good quality of life, right? And Western medicine is not so good at extending our health span. But ancient wisdom, these ancient healing systems and systems of medicine, they're actually very good at extending health span. So the idea here is how can we bring those two things together? How can we integrate what we know in Western medicine that increases our lifespan, the number of chronological years that we are alive? How can we get our health span, the vitality, the optimal health, sort of the quality of life? How can we extend that to equal our lifespan? And when you can increase your health span to equal your lifespan, that's when you have longevity. So that's really the difference there.
And when we talk about longevity, I mean it's in yeah, I love how your book breaks it down. I mean, it really covers many different areas. It's not
Mhm.
just our bodies aging. There's more
Right.
to it.
Hmm. Yeah, I really do take the stance in the book of, this term anti-aging, you know, we sort of need to move away from that because we shouldn't be against aging. A little while ago, we talked about sort of the difference between an Eastern perspective and a Western perspective. And I think that this is such a big part of that. The Western perspective is let's fight against aging. And the reality is that we can't stop aging from happening, no matter how much we want to. We are going to get 1 year older every year that we chronologically are alive. Every birthday, we get 1 year older. And so we will age chronologically. So this idea of anti-aging is sort of something, it's kind of a myth that we've been sold, I think, in Western culture. And I really think that, tapping into this idea of longevity, of extending longevity, of embracing aging and all of the beauty that comes with it, I think that's really the key that will help so many people. And that's really why I wrote the book.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Dr. Avanti Kumar Singh in regards to her new book, The Longevity Formula. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Are you an author, speaker, or expert who is looking for more publicity? Visit radioguestlist.com and sign up for free interview requests from shows looking for guests. Radio Guest List is the #1 free booking resource for radio, podcasts, and TV talk shows who are looking for experts like you right now. Visit radioguestlist.com and sign up today to get the visibility you deserve.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special. When you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
It's one thing to become attached to your perfect home, but what do you do when that home becomes attached to you? A family in dire need of a fresh start, a mysterious house tied to the past. Buried deep within the foundation of the old Far Hill Manor lies a centuries-old secret. Dark forces or something stronger just waiting to be discovered. Caretaker, a supernatural thriller by breakout authors R.J. Halpert.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest, Dr. Avanti Kumar Singh, who's here to share with us her new book, The Longevity Formula. So in your book, you talk about reducing inflammation as a key to boosting longevity. I'd love for you to share how the Ayurveda principles address that.
Yeah. And so it comes back again to sort of this idea of how do you continually nourish the tissues? When the tissues become depleted, that's when the problems happen. And really, again, there's no exact way to correlate depletion of the tissues with inflammation in the sense of there's no Ayurvedic term that says inflammation. But what I can tell you is that the depletion of the tissues is caused by inflammation. right? That's how they kind of connect. And so again, we know that inflammation from a Western medical standpoint, inflammation is related and connected to pretty much every chronic illness that we know of. We can always trace it back to some inflammatory response that has gone sort of haywire. Inflammation is a good thing. It's protective. The problem is that inflammation can go out of control really, really quickly. And in the Western world, in the culture that we live in the modern world that we live in, we are always dealing with inflammation, low level, chronic level of inflammation. And so this inflammation is a huge problem when it comes to increasing all of the chronic illnesses that we associate with aging. It causes depletion of the tissues. And so what are the things that we can do, right? We know a lot of the things that we talk about in Western medicine, whether it's dietary changes, it's lifestyle changes. These are things that can really help with decreasing inflammation. From an Ayurvedic standpoint, what I always talk about is something that I actually wrote about in my first book, which is the optimizing health pyramid. And it's really this idea that there are sort of these three areas of remedy, if you will, that you can use to really help take control of your health, on a daily basis in your own home. And really, you don't need to go to a doctor. You don't need to go to, a therapist or a trainer or anyone else to do these things. These are things you can do at home. And really, the base of that pyramid, of this optimizing health pyramid, is when we change our routines. And that really taps into circadian medicine. Okay. Sort of the middle of that pyramid is all about the diet, right? And that's, everything that we take in from all five senses, not just the food and drink that we take in through our mouth. We're very focused on food in Western culture, which we should be, but there's so much more to diet, what we're taking into our whole system. And the diet really correlates with sort of this gut microbiome that we know about in Western medicine. And then at the top of the pyramid is what I call the tools of yoga. And I say tools of yoga because it's so much more than just the postures or the asana. Yoga is about so many things: meditation, breath work, chanting, visualization, the posture, the physical postures, right? There's so many pieces of yoga. And when we're talking about the tools of yoga, we know that that correlates to this idea of vagal stimulation, when we can downshift and downregulate our system from this sympathetic stress response that, by the way, is the biggest cause of inflammation. And we can downregulate into a parasympathetic or relaxed state, which can, again, extend our longevity. So what we can do is if we can tap into these three areas of remedy, which is what I kind of go into in the book, what we're doing is, again, by these simple things that we can do on a daily basis that we can really embrace and start to do at home every day, that can extend our longevity.
I know you have so many simple practices within your book. Do you have one you can share with us now?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me back up before I talk about that. I always like to talk about the why. And all of the practices I talk about, almost 25 different practices in the book. And that is not to overwhelm anybody, but it's really to say, start where makes the best sense for you, right? We're going for a quick win is what I always say to my patients and students. You want to incorporate a practice that really will be easy for you to incorporate, so you feel a sense of accomplishment. You're going for a quick win, because positive always, sort of builds upon itself. And so when you have a quick win, you're more inclined to do the next thing that's good for your health. That's sort of my philosophy in general. But the book is really based on these 5 longevity switches. And so I divide all of the practices into sort of these 5 areas. And the first is to remove toxins. The second is to add prana or life force energy. The third is to move that life force energy. The fourth is to sync with nature. And the fifth is to feed or nourish the system, body, mind, and soul. And the practices, a little sort of spoiler alert, is that all of the practices ultimately flip all of those longevity switches on. And so I will talk about maybe just, three really simple ones. Three practices, and these are things that I think are very simple to do, sort of those quick wins that you can start doing today to switch those longevity switches on. The first is to fast for 12 hours overnight. Simply just don't eat overnight. So if you finish your last meal at 8 p.m., don't eat until 8 o'clock the next morning. Why is that important? From a longevity perspective, it's because fasting will sort of stimulate a process called autophagy. Autophagy is something that's been talked about a lot lately in medical news and the wellness industry as a promoter of longevity. And that's because autophagy is this process we have in the body which actually will clean up all of sort of those old junky cellular parts that are sort of sitting around, right? The damaged cells that I was talking about, that accumulation of damaged cells in the tissues and the organs and just hanging around, they cause a little bit of low-grade chronic inflammation if they're not cleaned up. Autophagy is this process that we have in the body that will clean up those junky cells and get rid of them. And that happens every night. Now, the thing is that as we age chronologically, that function, that process of autophagy will slow down. Fasting, however, overnight will kickstart that process every night. And so, and it's actually been found from a study's perspective, that the data shows that fasting is actually the greatest stimulator of autophagy. And so just by not eating for 12 hours every night, you can kick on that process every night, and that will support your longevity. So that's the first thing I would say that everyone should absolutely do. Fast for 12 hours overnight.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I have actually been hearing quite a bit about fasting, and it's interesting you talk about the 12 hours. Is there a difference if we go 12 to 16?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 12 hours, I always say 12 hours because that's the easiest to start with again, because if you try to do too much too fast, first of all, you may not be able to stick to it. It can be hard to change your habits. And so, just having this idea of not eating while you're sleeping, I can think that's a really easy place to start. But yes, anywhere between 14 and 16 hours seems to be, from the data, sort of the sweet spot where you get the biggest bang for your buck. Going above 16 hours for most women can be a little tricky, and it can cause some other hormonal issues if you're not careful. That doesn't happen for everybody, but it is common. So I always tell people to just really stick between 14 and 16 hours, but start with 12. Do a 12-hour fast every night, get used to that. And then maybe you increase to 14 hours, and then maybe you increase to 16 hours. That's about the sweet spot. So I would say anywhere between 12 and 16 hours is ideal.
What great information that is, especially coming from you. I mean, here you are, you're an MD. So it's not just somebody that's been, and I don't know if this is even going to sound right, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway, that's been practicing Ayurveda. I mean, it's such a dynamic study, and I have great respect for it. But to have, being an actual medical doctor as well, I mean, you really combine both of these worlds together so well.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I think, again, it's always important, I find, from a Western standpoint. I mean, I'm a trained Western physician. I've grown up here. I grew up with Ayurveda in my family, but then I was trained in Western medicine. And I think what I really try to do is bring sort of the power of this ancient healing medical system of Ayurveda. And I try to bring it to a place where people can sort of I can meet people where they are, right? The Western mind wants to know why. And that's great. And so here's the proof. And sort of that's sort of my perspective, is that let's talk about these practices we've done for 5,000 years in Ayurveda that we know work because we see the proof. We see our elders living into their 90s with such vitality, right? what are they doing? Right. That was the original question I had. And so we obviously have the proof that it's working. But now what's the science behind it of why it's working? And so right there, a practice of fasting, which, my mother would fast once a week for cultural and religious reasons. It turns out it was also for Ayurvedic reasons, where she would do a very long fast once a week. And what she was doing is she was resetting her whole body and kickstarting this autophagy in a major way once a week. Hence, she's 75 and lives independently and is in great health. And, she's sort of my ideal. I look up to my mom and I'm like, okay, I need to do what she was doing. But again, the practices have the science and the data behind them.
Well, I think this is such an important discussion because I can remember family members who were 55 and they were like over. And it's because I think it has a lot to do with just lifestyle at that point and education.
Right. Exactly. I would agree. Yeah. It's always so interesting. I always encourage my patients and students to really dig into your cultural background. Ask the elders in your family, why they did what they did. And they may not always know the answer, but you can get a lot of clues as to, why do they make certain recipes at certain times of the year? Why did they use certain spice combinations? Why did they do X, Y, and Z for this symptom or that symptom? There's so much medicine in what they'll tell you that you'll learn so much, because again, it's not actually random, and it's not sort of old wives' tales or woo woo. There's actually probably a lot of science that is in those practices that they didn't even realize that was there, but it had been handed down through their ancestry. So I always encourage people to really look into that if they're interested.
So nice to see science catch up with what all these tried and true ways of living have been.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always just so incredible and interesting. And I really think that, one of the things I always try to get across to my students and patients is that you don't have to be eating Indian food or using, spices that come from South Asia that are used in Indian food or any of these things to necessarily be practicing Ayurveda. Yes, are there Ayurvedic practices that are very tied to South Asia and the foods and the spices and sort of the traditions? Absolutely. But you can also translate it into many different cultures. So that's where that piece of sort of digging into your family ancestry and culture and cultural traditions comes from. Because my perspective is that Ayurveda, while it came from South Asia, from India, it's actually a knowledge of humanity. It's sort of built into us as humans, because what I always find is that anytime I do a lecture, I will have people coming up to me at the break or after and just saying to me, I didn't know much about Ayurveda. I had heard of it, but it just makes sense to me. I get it. Intuitively, I just understand what you're saying. And I really think that that's because it is so much a part of the way that humans live and how we live in the natural world, that it does become sort of this intuition that we're tapping into when we're practicing Ayurvedic practices.
In your book, you talk about prana, and I'd love for
Mhm.
you to share what that is with us and how that interweaves with everything.
So prana is life force energy. Some of your listeners may have heard of it as qi in Chinese medicine, right? It's this idea that is this life force energy that sort of permeates everything in the natural world, in nature, in the universe. And it also runs through our physical body and our energetic body. When we add prana, we're adding the energy of the sun, the wind or the air, and the earth and water. Okay. These are all sources of prana. And from a Western standpoint, These are all things that we need to live, right? We need to breathe air. We need fresh water. We need sunlight. These are all things that we need to exist and to live. From an Ayurvedic standpoint, it's because it's that universal life force energy. Those are the sources of it. And so when we have prana, that is, again, we're adding prana to our physical body, and then we're moving that prana through the physical body, through the energetic body, through the mind. We will actually help to clear any blockages that might be present that cause symptoms down the line. So prana is really, really important from an Ayurvedic standpoint, but it turns out prana is also really important from a Western standpoint as well.
I know your book also talks about just syncing with nature and in many ways kind of
Mhm.
connecting with nature. And
Mhm.
for those folks that live in areas that there isn't much nature around them, how do they
Mhm.
incorporate this?
Yeah, so that goes back to actually one of the practices we talked about earlier, which is doing that morning sun viewing, which actually also happens to be the second sort of practice I would suggest to all of your listeners to do every day, again, to support their longevity. And what that is again, is that you are syncing with nature, you're syncing your circadian rhythm and restarting it, sort of resetting it every day. So, again, every morning you want to get outside in the natural sunlight, no sunglasses, not through a window, not through a car, where you can get natural sunlight into your eyes, hitting your retina. Now, that doesn't mean you're looking directly at the sun, but it's just being outside in natural sunlight for anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes before 10 o'clock in the morning, or as early as you can, as close to waking up as you can. What that does is that when you have light that hits your retina, it sends a signal to your brain through the pineal gland. It sends a signal and this information to your brain that, oh, it's daytime. Let's decrease melatonin, which is your sleep hormone, we'll call it, and let's increase cortisol, which is your wake hormone, right? And the reason that's important again is because that actually then has a cascade of all of the other hormones, all of the other functions in the body are controlled by sort of those two master control hormones, which are influenced by light. So that's why syncing with nature is so important on a daily basis. And we can do that just by getting out in natural sunlight every single morning.
It's interesting that it seems that chronic disease is related to aging. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's definitely the truth, right? You know, again, as we age, as we chronologically get older every year, our cells don't have the same sort of vitality, robust sort of turnover and function that they did when they were chronologically younger. So as we get older chronologically, right? We need to do things that support that cellular turnover, the cellular function, the mechanisms of action that we have in our bodies that are so much easier to do when we are chronologically younger, right? The reason I say this is that that's linked to chronic illness. As we age chronologically, as the cells get older and they lose their function, right? That is where the problems start. And we start to see chronic illness that is related to that aging of the cells. And so, yes, absolutely, it is absolutely connected. Now, does that mean that that's sort of the inevitable? No, of course not. It just means that we have to do things on a daily basis to help support our longevity, to help support our cells so that we can sort of decrease the likelihood that those chronic illnesses will become problems. So, you know, these chronic illnesses are associated with aging. They're not inevitable. They're not that they're going to happen no matter what, right? They're associated with aging because of cellular aging or chronological aging.
That's good to know. I mean, you've done such great work as a doctor and you advocate for holistic approaches. How do you see the medical field evolving in this regard?
Well, I think that it's already happening, honestly. I think that, you know, more and more consumers, right? All of us that are trying to just live healthier and live with more vitality, we're seeing that Western medicine doesn't give us all the answers, right? And many people are very, very frustrated by it. And so they're looking to other healing systems. You know, this is very, very common. People are looking to what else can they do to support their health. And so I think just from a consumer standpoint, it's inevitable. We're already going in that direction. From a practitioner or from a Western medicine standpoint, I think that we can't stop that from happening, right? While we have the technology, and all of the data, the truth is that most Western doctors at this point can't deny what they see with these practices. They can't deny that the science is there, right? Because we're doing the studies and it proves everything that we've been doing in these ancient healing systems. And so I sort of feel like we're at that really, really interesting point in time where not only is the consumer wanting this, the practitioners, sort of the medical field, the Western medical field, the establishment is sort of starting to see that consumers want it, the data's there. How do we start to integrate it? So I think that we're in a place where we can go in this direction where everybody can start to work together. The practitioners can really support their patients more, even more than they have, by offering not just the Western medical techniques and technology and medication and procedures, but also encouraging their patients to do these things on a daily basis, whether it's lifestyle medicine, you want to call it, or nutritional medicine or culinary medicine, all of these different fields. I think that there's sort of this coming together that's this really beautiful, natural sort of integration that we're moving towards.
Well, what an exciting time we live in that that's all coming together finally,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we as patients we're the ones who really benefit the most from this.
Well, what would you like our readers and listeners to take away from your book, The Longevity Formula?
I think if there is really one thing I want everyone to take away from it is that you have so much power within. You have so much healing, intuition, and wisdom within you. It's just a matter of tapping back into it and really connecting to it. And realizing that you have that power and that small changes can really add up over time and create big results. And so a small change, getting outside for 10 to 15 to 20 minutes in the natural sunlight, you may think that that's not going to do much, but it does so, so much for you. And so I'd really encourage people to really sort of take back that power into your own hands and do small things. They really add up.
Well, Doctor, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work and your book?
Thank you so much. I would love to connect with all of you. You can connect with me on my website, which is my full name, avantikumarsingh.com. And you can pre-order the book there as well. You can listen to my podcast, the Healing Catalyst podcast. It's available on all of the major platforms. And I'm on Instagram quite a bit. That's sort of the social platform I'm on. Feel free to follow me there. It's my full name, Avanti Kumar Singh. Feel free to send me a message in the DM. I always try to answer all the messages that I can and provide any, resources or tools that I can in the DM. So I'd love to connect with you on any of those places.
Well, Dr. Kumar Singh, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Well, thank you, Dr. Avanti Kumar Singh, for taking the time to be on the show with us today and sharing your book, The Longevity Formula. The Longevity Formula is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers, and you can purchase this book directly from the publisher, Sounds True, at soundstrue.com. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Mary Ann, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.